everyone. I just wanted to say to you that your children and your families are very much at risk, particularly at this time, from video nasties, from media violence, from pornography, and even, could be, from cable television.
In our society today, we are all susceptible to the influences of the media. We make no apologies for talking once again to someone who, at the same time as criticising the media, is also able to manipulate it. Last week, I talked to someone who many people consider to be the lady next door, everybody's favourite auntie, Mrs. Mary Whitehouse.
Under the 1984 Video Recordings Act, the British Board of Film Censors, the BBFC, became responsible for the certification of both cinema and video releases. It became illegal to supply kids with 15 and 18 rated pictures. The Exorcist was not submitted for review, however, causing it to be removed from all shelves. The term video nasty refers to any pictures that were unsubmitted to the BBFC or didn't pass it. The video nasty period seemed to specifically target low-budget horror films, as these were often the ones that went more intense. A major argument against nasties was that they covered and featured topics that were brutal and disturbing, ergo their banning. But should evil be neither seen nor heard? Or are we ignoring the bigger picture? Reality. There is a consistent argument when it comes to censorship in the media. Are these topics even worth mentioning?
Hello, my name's Carl and I got into horror movies when I was 5 years of age, and I know that's a weird opening, but it's the truth. It's what stuck with me until this day. Now, my first ever horror movie that my dad inflicted on me was Poltergeist. I tell you, having a guy's face melt off into a kitchen sink like meat certainly sticks with somebody. In regard to the video nasty era of films like Toby Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the government were basically looking for ways to blame other things at that time. That's the way I look at it. We had lots of riots, we had lots of problems kind of going on, and I think, as with anything, it was the government's way of kind of diverting attention. The only thing I will say is I've always felt that horror and gore should only serve a purpose for the plot of the film. If you've just got violence for violence sake, then you're just going to lose your audience. But then you have other films that I have in high regard, like Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave. I know the subject matter is extreme, but you have to have that element because then you have empathy towards the character. So in regard to censorship, I think people should have a choice. You can always put a disclaimer at the beginning of the film saying, this film contains gratuitous violence and stuff like that. But it is weird in the UK, still to this day we have a weird attitude towards censorship. Films in regard to animals or children. A great example is The Abyss from a couple of years ago. When it was re-released, they still censor the scene with the mice being tested on.
I have on the telephone now Mrs. Mary Whitehouse, President of the National Viewers and Listeners Association. Mrs. Whitehouse, what's your response to the film?
Well, I haven't seen the film, and I wouldn't see the film. I can tell you my response to the title when I had a phone call from somebody saying that they would like to talk to me about this film, The Pope Must Die. I could hardly believe it is, actually. It has been mentioned to me once or twice here by people who are of the Catholic faith, and they are absolutely affronted by the thing.
I mean, in the film itself, it's not violent, and the Pope, in fact, doesn't.
No, but you don't. You don't say. On the poster it doesn't say the Pope must die, and then in brackets underneath, don't worry, the Pope doesn't die in the film. It's stupid.
So I was born in 1979, and around school, growing up in the 80s, we always used to talk about the video nasties. There was a lot of urban legends at school about these films because nobody ever saw them. There was no real internet back then, so you had no way of fact-checking what was correct and what wasn't correct. You just knew Texas Chainsaw Massacre was banned. It happened, driller killer. People used to go about drilling people's heads, and the effects were so good, which they weren't really, but you never knew what was real and what wasn't real. And then there'd be films like The Exorcist, which again wasn't necessarily part of the video nasties, but it was still banned, certainly in this country. And there'd be stories of people passing out going to see it, people dying on set when they were filming it, and loads of like I say, urban legends around these kind of films. So we lived in a newsagent's growing up, and my dad had a video rental service where he would essentially charge a customer £70 odd, which was a lot back then, and that would enable them to buy video, and then once they'd bought the video, they could then borrow or rent any of the other videos. It was kind of like they were building up the stock themselves, and my dad was hoarding them, but then each year they'd pay another £70 odd to then become another member, so there'd be even more stock coming back and forth. So it essentially meant that all of these films were sat at our house. There'd only be 3 or 4 TV channels back then before. And my older brother Dave, he'd often put some of these films on. Like, I certainly remember watching a lot of zombie flesh eaters growing up. But for me, it's not necessarily just nostalgia. It's part of who I am now.
I've never seen a video nasty. I wouldn't. I have far too much.
But how can you judge on a video nasty if you've never seen one?
Look, if somebody tells me, as we get these reports in from Europe, from America, and from this country, that a particular video nasty contains that, and that, I actually don't need to see visually what I know is in that film.
The story I can share occurred around 1983 to 1984. We had a lot of local VHS stores that would rent movies. Before the video nasty door, films such as Raiders of the Lost Ark sat alongside Cannibal Holocaust on the shelf. As an adult, they would get subscription cards for the stores, but children could return the tapes, and this led to them renting tapes out too. Just like selling to underage drinkers, the video shop would rent any film out to children without asking. As the ban came into effect, the video nasty list was put under the counter along with pornography. Eventually these tapes became compilations similar to the Faces of Death films. So about 15 minutes from my home, a real home invasion took place. The family was held hostage overnight in a way that closely mirrored the movie A House on the Edge of the Park. The perpetrator was caught after letting the father go out to buy cigarettes. I do remember there was mental illness involved in this crime, and the family was relocated. They were fairly wealthy at the time, as they could afford to buy VHS cassettes. This was a rare luxury. The local video store being the same one I mentioned.
There is an indisputable cult following when it comes to this material. From people who seek to preserve unloved or forgotten media, to people who simply get a kick out of the controversy. Video nasties are alive and well, and Mary Whitehouse is rolling in her grave.
Damn fine custard. Rich and creamy, just the way I like it.